The world knew me as Alistair Beaumont, a man who moved mountains of money with a whisper. But in my penthouse, 3 impossibly small lives were fading, and my vast power was utterly useless. The world knows me as Alistair Beaumont, the man who can move markets with a single phone call, the architect of a tech empire that reshaped the digital landscape. My penthouse overlooks the city, a glass and steel monument to my success. But for the past 6 months, my world had shrunk to the size of 3 medical-grade incubators, housed in a sterile white room that used to be a library. The only sound wasn't the triumphant ring of a closing deal, but the soft, rhythmic, and utterly terrifying beep of 3 tiny heart monitors. My triplets, Oliver, Amelia, and Charlotte, were born 4 months premature. My wife Eleanor didn't survive the delivery. She left me with 3 impossibly small, fragile pieces of her, and they were fading. The best doctors in the world, men and women I had flown in on private jets and paid fortunes to, would stand by their incubators, look at their charts, and offer the same useless platitudes. "We're doing everything we can, Mr. Beaumont. It's a very complex, undiagnosed neonatal condition. They called it failure to thrive, a term so gentle it felt like a deliberate cruelty. It wasn't a failure to thrive. It was a slow, agonizing surrender. I had been through a dozen elite nannies and neonatal nurses. They'd arrive with impeccable credentials and compassionate smiles, but their eyes would betray their fear within a week. They couldn't handle the oppressive silence of the nursery, the constant threat of an alarm, the sight of my children who looked more like tiny, translucent birds than human babies. They couldn't handle me, a hollowed-out shell of a man, pacing the halls at 3 a.m., my grief and rage a palpable force in the air. Then came Clara. She wasn't sent by a prestigious agency. My head of staff, Arthur, a man who had been with my family for 40 years, found her through a series of hushed, desperate phone calls to contacts he hadn't spoken to in decades. Her resume was a patchwork of inconsistencies, short-term positions in remote clinics, a 2-year gap that was completely unaccounted for, and references that were difficult, if not impossible, to verify. She was in her late 30s, with eyes that looked like they had seen far too much. There were no gentle smiles, no practiced reassurances. She walked into the nursery, bypassed me completely, and just stood there, watching my children through the sterile plastic. "They're losing heat," she said, her voice quiet but firm. It wasn't a question. Dr. Evans, the lead neonatologist, bristled beside me. "Their core temperatures are stable and monitored constantly," he snapped, his professional pride wounded. Clara didn't even look at him. Her gaze was fixed on Amelia, the smallest of the 3. "Not the kind of heat your machines can read," she murmured, almost to herself. "It's their life force. It's draining away, like water through a sieve." I should have thrown her out. The term life force had no place in this multi-million-dollar medical ward I had built in my own home. But I was a drowning man, and she was, for some insane reason, the first person who didn't look like she was offering me a stone to hold on to. I saw something in her eyes that wasn't pity or fear. It was recognition. She was looking at my dying children as if she understood what was happening to them on a level no one else could. Against every rational instinct and the furious protests of my entire medical team, I hired her. The first few days were strange. Clara moved like a ghost. She spoke little, but her presence was immense. She would sit by the incubators for hours on end, not reading or checking her phone, but simply observing. She'd place her hand on the glass, her brow furrowed in concentration. The nurses complained she was unsettling, that she was interfering with their routines by just being there. But something was changing. The alarms, which used to go off a dozen times a day as one of the triplets' heart rates or oxygen levels would plummet, started to quiet. It was subtle at first. An hour of peace, then 2, then a whole afternoon. Dr. Evans was dismissive. "It's a coincidence, a temporary plateau in their decline." But I saw the way he watched her from the doorway, a mixture of contempt and confusion on his face. Clara ignored him. Her focus was entirely on the children. One evening, I found her humming a low, strange melody to Oliver. It wasn't a lullaby I recognized. It was a haunting, minor-key tune that seemed to make the very air in the room vibrate. Oliver, who rarely moved, had turned his tiny head a fraction of an inch towards the sound. My hope, a fragile and dangerous thing, began to flicker to life. Maybe she was the miracle I had been praying for. So I did what I always do when faced with an unknown variable. I had her investigated. I hired the best private security firm in the country, the kind that can find out what you ate for breakfast 10 years ago. I told them to be discreet, but to dig up everything. For a week there was nothing but whispers of a past that had been deliberately and expertly scrubbed. Then, this afternoon, the lead investigator called me. "Mr. Beaumont," he said, his voice grim, "you need to see this. We're sending the encrypted file now." The file landed in my inbox with a soft chime that sounded like a death knell. I opened it. Clara's real name wasn't Clara, and the 2-year gap in her resume. She'd been in prison. The charge was involuntary manslaughter, but that wasn't the worst of it. The details of the case were sealed, but the file contained a partially redacted psychiatric evaluation from the trial. It mentioned delusions, unorthodox healing practices, and a prior charge, dropped for lack of evidence, of practicing medicine without a license, which had resulted in the death of a child. A cold dread washed over me, so intense it made me physically sick. I had let a monster into my home. A killer. I grabbed my phone to call security, my thumb hovering over the button. At that exact moment, a high-pitched, frantic alarm blared from the nursery's remote monitoring system. It was Amelia's. Code blue. Critical oxygen desaturation. Her heart rate was crashing. I dropped my phone and sprinted from my office, my own heart hammering against my ribs. I burst into the nursery to see a scene from my worst nightmare. The on-duty nurse was on the floor, unconscious. Dr. Evans was nowhere to be seen. And Clara had the incubator open. She had my tiny, fragile daughter in her hands, disconnected from the tubes and wires. The machine screamed their warnings of death. But Clara was calm. In her other hand she held a small dark glass vial, and she was slowly, deliberately tipping it towards my daughter's lips. "Get away from her!" The roar tore from my throat, raw and primal. I launched myself across the room, my mind a white-hot storm of betrayal and terror. The investigator's report, the word manslaughter, the image of another dead child, it all coalesced into this one horrifying moment. I was about to tackle her, to rip my daughter from her hands, when she turned her head slightly. She didn't look scared. She didn't even look surprised. Her eyes, those ancient, weary eyes, met mine, and in them was a command as powerful and undeniable as a physical blow. "Wait," she said, her voice a low whisper that somehow cut through the cacophony of the alarms, and for a single, insane second. I did. I froze, my arms outstretched, 2 feet from my child. In that moment of hesitation, she tipped the vial. A single, dark, viscous drop fell from the glass and landed on Amelia's pale tongue. Then another. The screaming alarm seemed to reach a fever pitch. Code blue. Cardiac arrest imminent. My world was ending right here, in this sterile white room. I had paid a killer to murder my daughter. Then, silence. One by one, the alarms stopped. The frantic, high-pitched beeping of Amelia's heart monitor slowed, steadied, and settled into a rhythm that was stronger and more regular than I had ever heard. The blood-red warning on the oxygen saturation screen flickered, turned yellow, and then a calm, miraculous green. I stared, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Amelia, who had been a sickly, grayish blue, was flushing with a faint, healthy pink. She took a breath. A real, deep breath, not the shallow, bird-like gasps that had defined her short life. The door flew open and Dr. Evans skidded into the room, followed by 2 of my security guards. He took one look at the scene. The open incubator, the disconnected wires scattered on the floor, me standing frozen, and Clara holding my daughter, and his face turned purple with rage. "What in God's name is going on here? Seize her!" he yelled at the guards. "She's assaulted a nurse. She's killed the child." The guards moved forward, their hands reaching for Clara. "No," I said. The word was quiet, choked, but it stopped them in their tracks. They looked at me, then at Dr. Evans, their expressions a mask of confusion. Dr. Evans sputtered, "Alistair, have you gone mad? She needs to be arrested. Look what she's done." "I am looking," I said, my voice gaining strength. I couldn't take my eyes off my daughter. She was alive, more alive than she had been in 6 months. Clara, with an almost reverent gentleness, placed Amelia back in the incubator and began deftly reattaching the tiny sensors. "The nurse fainted when the alarms first went off," Clara said, not looking up from her work. "She panicked. I did not have time to help her. Amelia was crashing. The protocols weren't working. She was leaving." "Leaving? What the hell does that mean?" Dr. Evans blustered, stepping forward to peer at the monitors. He stared, his mouth agape. He tapped the screen, as if to make sure it wasn't a malfunction. "This is impossible. Her vitals, they're better than baseline. What did you give her? What was in that vial?" He whirled on Clara, his scientific mind rebelling against the evidence before him. Clara straightened up and finally looked at him. "Something your medicine has forgotten," she said simply. Then she turned her gaze to me. The fire was back in my veins now, cold and sharp. The miracle of Amelia's recovery was warring with the cold, hard facts of the security report clutched in my memory. "You were in prison," I said, my voice dangerously low, "for manslaughter. A child died in your care before." She didn't flinch. There was no denial, no flicker of fear in her eyes, only a deep, profound sadness. "Yes," she said. "They said I killed him. His parents knew I didn't. They knew I was the only reason he had lived a week past the doctor's predictions. But when you can't explain a cure, and you can't stop the inevitable forever, people need someone to blame. The law requires it." My head was spinning. Everything in my life was quantifiable, logical, built on data and evidence. This was something else entirely. This was faith or madness, and I couldn't tell the difference. "Security will escort you to the guest suite in the south wing," I said, my voice hard as steel. "You will not leave that room. You will not speak to anyone. You are a prisoner in my home until I figure out what you are and what the hell you just did to my daughter." Dr. Evans opened his mouth to protest, but I shot him a look that could freeze fire. He snapped it shut. The guards, looking relieved to have clear orders, moved to flank Clara. She gave a small, resigned nod and allowed them to lead her out of the room. As she reached the doorway, she paused and looked back. Not at me, but at the other 2 incubators. At Oliver and Charlotte. A chill I couldn't explain snaked its way down my spine. "You don't have much time, Mr. Beaumont," she said, her voice heavy with a certainty that terrified me. "What I gave Amelia, it's not a cure, it's a tether. It's a temporary anchor to hold her here. But the underlying problem, the reason they are all fading, is still there. It's in all 3 of them, a shared weakness. And now that her anchor is holding, it's pulling the other 2 down even faster." Her words hung in the sterile air long after the guards had escorted her away. "It's pulling the other 2 down even faster." The thought was a venomous snake, coiling around the fragile hope that had just bloomed in my chest. Dr. Evans, ever the scientist, was already dismissing it. "Preposterous," he muttered, his face buried in Amelia's chart, then Oliver's, then Charlotte's. "She's trying to manipulate you, Alistair. Some kind of charlatan's trick to make herself indispensable. Their vitals are exactly as they were 5 minutes ago. Stable, but poor." But I had seen Clara's eyes. I had felt the absolute conviction in her voice. For the next hour, I stood like a statue between the incubators, my gaze darting from Oliver to Charlotte. Dr. Evans and his team swarmed around Amelia, running every test imaginable, trying to find a rational, medical explanation for her sudden, impossible recovery. They drew blood, checked her brain activity, analyzed the oxygen content in the room. They found nothing. Amelia remained a stable, pink-breathing miracle, an anomaly their science couldn't explain. And while they focused on the miracle, I watched the nightmare unfold. It started with Oliver. A single sharp beep from his monitor. A momentary dip in his oxygen levels. Dr. Evans glanced over, dismissive. "It's a fluctuation. Perfectly normal for his condition." But it wasn't. It was followed by another dip a few minutes later, this one deeper, longer. Then Charlotte's monitor echoed the alarm. Her tiny heart, which had maintained a weak but steady rhythm for weeks, began to flutter erratically. The nursery, which had fallen into a state of stunned calm, once again became a frantic hive of activity. But this time it was different. It wasn't the managed crisis of before. This was a chaotic, desperate scramble. The interventions that used to stabilize them, a slight increase in oxygen, a minor adjustment to their medication, were having no effect. It was as if their bodies were suddenly rejecting all medical help. They were sinking, and the doctors were throwing them anchors made of sand. "I don't understand," Dr. Evans shouted, his professional composure shattering into a million pieces. "Their systems are all crashing at once. It's like a chain reaction." He looked at me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror and a grudging, terrified understanding. He had seen the proof in Amelia, and now he was seeing the proof in her siblings. Clara had been right. My blood ran cold. I had locked away the only person who seemed to understand what was happening. I had called her a prisoner. I turned and ran, leaving the chaos behind. I didn't bother with the elevator. I took the stairs to the south wing, 2 at a time, my lungs burning. The 2 guards I'd posted outside her suite snapped to attention as I skidded to a halt in front of them. "Open it," I gasped. Clara was sitting in a chair by the window, looking out at the city lights as if she were a tourist, not a captive. She didn't seem surprised to see me. She simply turned her head, her expression unreadable. "Oliver and Charlotte," I said, my voice ragged. "They're crashing, just like you said." She nodded slowly. "They are bound together. 3 threads of the same fragile cord. When I strengthened Amelia's thread, it put a strain on the other 2. She stood and walked towards me. There was no "I told you so" in her demeanor, only a quiet urgency. The substance I gave her was a tincture made from a plant that grows only in one specific valley, a place the locals call the Cradle of Souls. It doesn't heal. It only buys time. It strengthens the body's connection to its own life force, preventing it from slipping away. "What do they need?" I asked, my desperation stripping away all my pride, my skepticism, my rational mind. I was a father, and nothing else mattered. "Whatever it is, I'll get it. I'll pay anything." Her gaze was intense, searching. "It isn't something money can buy, Mr. Beaumont. The weakness isn't in their bodies. Not really. It's in their spirit. They share a single fractured will to live. They came into this world without their mother, and they don't have a strong enough anchor to hold them here. They need a connection, a tether, something, or someone, to give them a reason to stay." "I'm their father," I cried, the words raw with pain. "I'm here. I haven't left their side." "Being here is not the same as being with them," she said softly, and her words struck me with the force of a physical blow. "Your grief is a wall of ice around you. They can't feel you through it. They can only feel the cold. They need warmth. They need a sacrifice." "A sacrifice? What are you talking about? You want me to perform some kind of ritual?" The cynical part of my brain was screaming that this was all an elaborate con. "Not a ritual, a transfer," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A conscious offering of your own vitality. You have to be willing to give a piece of yourself to them, to connect your life force to theirs and pull them back. But it comes with an extreme cost. The process will leave you permanently weakened. It will age you. It might take years off your life, and there is no guarantee it will work. If their will is too weak, your energy will dissipate into nothing, and you might not wake up at all." She held my gaze, her own eyes reflecting the impossible weight of the choice she was laying before me. "The last time I attempted this," she said, her voice barely audible, "was with the child I was accused of killing. His father wasn't strong enough. The transfer failed, and the effort, it took them both." The silence in the opulent guest suite was heavier than a shroud. Her last words echoed in my mind. It took them both. My empire, my fortune, the name Beaumont that commanded respect in boardrooms across the globe, it all evaporated, leaving only the stark, terrifying equation. My life for theirs. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a transaction, the most important deal of my life, with my own mortality as the capital. Every instinct I had honed in the cutthroat world of business screamed at me to analyze, to mitigate risk, to find a loophole. But when I pictured Oliver and Charlotte, their tiny chests struggling for each breath, I knew there was no choice. There was only a father. "Do it," I said. The words were quiet, but they held the weight of 1,000 contracts. "Tell me what I need to do." A flicker of something respect, perhaps, passed through Clara's eyes. "There is no preparation," she said, leading the way out of the room, the guards parting before us like the sea. "Only resolve." We walked back to the nursery in a silence that was thick with unspoken gravity. Dr. Evans and his team were fighting a losing battle. The monitors were a chaotic symphony of alarms, a frantic, digital scream for help. The staff parted for us, their faces a mixture of fear and confusion, as Clara, the pariah from moments before, now walked at my side with a chilling authority. She gestured for a chair to be placed between Oliver's and Charlotte's incubators. "Take off your watch, your ring, any metal," she instructed. I did as I was told, placing the symbols of my worldly success on a sterile tray. They looked like meaningless trinkets. "This will not be easy," she warned, her hands hovering over the latches of the incubators. "When the connection is made, you will feel them. You will feel their pain, their weakness, their struggle. It will feel like you are drowning. Your every instinct will tell you to pull away, to save yourself. If you do, the connection will sever, and they will be lost. You must hold on, no matter what." I sat, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Clara opened the incubators. She took my right hand and gently placed it on Oliver's impossibly small chest. His skin was cold. Then she took my left hand and laid it on Charlotte. I could barely feel the flutter of her heartbeat beneath my palm. "Close your eyes," Clara whispered. "Don't think about them as fragile babies. Think of them as extensions of yourself, as pieces of your own soul that have come untethered. Now, pull." I didn't understand what she meant at first. Pull. But then I focused, pushing past the wall of my own grief, reaching for them with something deeper than my hands. I imagined golden cords of light, extending from my chest to theirs. I poured all my love, all my memories of Eleanor, all my desperate hopes for their future into those cords, and then I pulled. The sensation was instantaneous and horrific. It was like plunging into an icy abyss. A crushing weakness flooded my body, sapping the strength from my limbs. I felt their struggle, the terrifying sensation of life slipping away, of fading into a cold, gray nothingness. My lungs burned as if I were the one who couldn't breathe. My heart hammered with the arrhythmia of theirs. Clara was right. Every cell in my body screamed at me to let go, to break the connection and save myself. I saw a flash of Eleanor's face, her smile, and then the faces of my children as I imagined them, healthy and whole. I held on. I gripped that connection with the last vestiges of my will, ignoring the black spots that danced in my vision and the roar of blood in my ears. I poured my life, my vitality, my very essence into them, anchoring them to the world. I don't know how long it lasted, seconds or an eternity. The last thing I heard was Clara's voice, calm and steady amidst the storm. "It's working. Hold on, Alistair. They're coming back." And then darkness consumed me. I awoke to the soft, rhythmic beeping of a single heart monitor. Not the frantic alarm of before, but a slow, steady, reassuring pulse. My own. I was in a hospital bed, an IV in my arm. Sunlight streamed through a large window. Arthur, my head of staff, was asleep in a chair by my side. His face, usually a stoic mask, was etched with worry. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my voice a useless rasp. He stirred, his eyes snapping open. A wave of relief washed over his features. "Mr. Beaumont, sir, you're awake." "The children?" I managed to croak. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, the first I had seen in months. "They're stable, sir. All 3 of them. Thriving, the doctors are saying. It's a miracle." He helped me take a sip of water. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. The doctors say it's extreme exhaustion, a systemic shock they can't quite explain. You look older, sir. I caught my reflection in the dark screen of the television. He was right. There were new lines etched around my eyes, and my hair, once uniformly black, was now streaked with silver at the temples. I felt a profound, bone-deep weariness, as if I had run a marathon in my sleep. But beneath it I felt a connection, a warmth in my chest that hadn't been there before. I felt my children. "Clara?" I asked. Arthur's expression became somber. "She's gone. The moment the children were stable and you were transported here, she just vanished. Left a note. Said her work was done. Doctor, Evans tried to have the police look for her, but I intervened. I told him he wouldn't be able to explain what he wanted to charge her with." He paused, then added, "All charges against her from that old case have been formally dropped. It seems the parents of the other child finally came forward and testified about what she really did for their son. Your lawyers are very efficient, sir." I knew then that I would never see Clara again. She was a ghost, a guardian who appeared in moments of impossible darkness. She hadn't been a nanny with a dark past. She was a healer with a tragic one. My world of numbers and profits had been irrevocably broken open to reveal something more. I had traded years of my life, but I had bought theirs. As I lay there, feeling the faint, distant but steady rhythm of their 3 hearts, beating in time with my own, I knew without a doubt it was the best deal I had ever made. The billionaire Alistair Beaumont had lost something, but the father had gained everything.